facing an overwhelming task, because really the kind of solidarity we have received in the form of that people have actually wanted to speak from this platform, it's really overwhelming. But I would like to share with you the schedule that we have for this week. Today, Ranabir Chakravarti from CHS will speak, and I would like to also invite Mahalakshmi from CHS to introduce him. But just before that, let me also tell you very briefly what we have in store. Tomorrow we have Mangai from 5 o'clock, who will be speaking on Dravid nationalism and Indian nationalism. Wednesday, there is no teaching in solidarity with the Parliament March. On Thursday, we will have the teach-in lecture delivered by Professor Makarand Paranjape on Gandhi, Tagore, Nation, JNU, and what's left of nation. And then on Friday, we will have Professor Jayati Ghosh speaking on the anti-national government policies. And then on Saturday, we have Professor Apurvanand from Delhi University. He will be speaking in Hindi, Gandhi Ka Aakhri Thikana, the last address of Gandhi. And on next Sunday, basically, we have Professor Romila Thapar and Harbans Mukhia speaking. We hope to continue with the lecture series at least for one more week. So let us go back to the drawing table and draw up the list. So I'll hand it over to Mahalakshmi.
Friends, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce Professor Ranabir Chakravarti, colleague at the Center for Ancient Indian, the Center for Historical Studies, Professor of Ancient Indian History. Professor Chakravarti taught at various universities in Bardhaman, Shantiniketan, and Kolkata, and in that sense, his anti-national credentials were well established before he came to CHS. His specialization is trade in ancient and early medieval India, particularly maritime trade and trading networks. But he has also been one of those scholars who has taken a very strong stand in public, writing extensively in Bangla, particularly in newspapers, also to a smaller extent in English perhaps, and we should encourage him to write a lot more in the English language newspapers as well, but defending the historian's craft, talking about the importance of looking critically at sources, the importance of using corroborative evidence rather than taking one particular source as really the repository of historical knowledge. He has also opposed the collapsing of mythology and history. In that sense, he is one of those who is ideally suited to come in this series. Today, he is going to be talking on Tagore and the idea of nationalism. And this is the 10th teach-in in the series, What the Nation Really Needs to Know, India, the National and Nationalism. Professor Chakravarti.
Thank you very much, Mahalakshmi and all friends. I'm not actually at all in a teaching mode. I'm addressing and sharing some of my thoughts on Tagore and trying to say something. I know my major limitations. I'm neither a literary scholar. As you heard, my professional basis is on a remote time in Indian history, not really connected with what is happening around us at this moment. And so my limitations are pretty well known. I have no grounding at all on political science or political theories. I'll try to say a few words on the present scenario of the national, anti-national, and where Tagore stands and where he's relevant, not where he's valid. That is not my question at all. I'm not seeking a validity of Tagore's creation. The vast and immensely multifarious creations. The validity I'm not asking for. The relevance, yes. But perhaps, as I said, my abilities are very limited, and the words at this moment perhaps won't capture what the songs just before my address were going on. The music and the spirited, evocative images that come out of songs are far more captivating and powerful than words in a kind of address. So do please bear with me. And I can recall that perhaps what songs can do, we all know of Tagore's fascinating creation of his songs. I'm not talking of the national anthems. We'll talk about it later. 1905 to 1910, when the huge mass movement against the partition of Bengal begins. 1905, Tagore is in Giridih. He gets the information that the movement has started. And for the first time, at the age of 44, he composes what is called the Baul song in his otherwise extremely varied and rich repertoire of songs. Amar Naiba Holo Pare Jawa. This is the first composition he brings in the form of a Baul song. This is not merely an act of a great musician and a composer. This is a political act, because for the first time a mass movement starts and he brings for the first time what is called a folk tune in his movement, and then we know that there was almost a cavalcade of songs which are brought under the category of Swadesh, different from his songs categorized under puja, devotional songs, prakriti of nature, of prem, love, and vichitra of diverse myriad. The myriadness is the quintessential part of Tagore. That's why the book by Andrew Robinson and Datta considers a myriad-minded man. It is difficult to categorize where Tagore is veering towards nationalism, where he's definitely throwing it out. If you have read, unfortunately this article is in Bangla, a few days back, Bodhisattva Kaur, who now teaches in South Africa, a product of this university, now dubbed as anti-national, has written a lacerating, sarcastic piece on how Tagore is at this moment outside the jail. Can he not be put to jail even after death? If someone could be awarded Bharat Ratna after one demises, then can he not be put into the bar, against the bar, after he is no more? At least the memory could be done that, because many of his statements are definitely against the cult of nationalism. There are several pieces, many things are well known to you. I'll only talk about certain, it is impossible to talk on Tagore's various political ideas. He is not a political person per se, but he's steeped in the understanding of what was going around him, not merely in the subcontinent, in that time India, the pre-partition India, but also around him in the world. The scenario with him is already by early 20th century, he is deeply distrustful about the idea of nation. In a way, there is an ambivalence, and that is something the best to capture him. In all his ideas, including his political ideas, the ambivalence, if nation is to be understood to have the dignity, self-esteem for Indians completely crushed by a ruthless colonial regime, then he will join forces of those who love the country. If that means parochialism, patriotism, directed at hating others, belittling others, he's quite good at it. That there Tagore will definitely oppose in a very sustained manner throughout his life. The scenario is, as I suggested, 1905, he has joined the folk with his folk tune songs under the name of Swadesh. Please note the term, he rarely uses the term Jati or Rashtriya. That is the kind of translation of nationalism. He never does that. He castigates that. He uses the term Swadesh, which in a very simple English term can be seen as my country, but is it kind of my country of Enoch Powell's voice, that my country right or wrong? Never. He perhaps uses in the sense of my homeland. If one has a home in a particular land, and therefore from the home towards the land and towards different lands, the concept of this homeland almost in a concentric circle, starting with the family, then with the neighbors, then with the locality, then perhaps over a greater region covering the entire country, then perhaps going beyond the country, thereby completely negating the artificial boundaries set up by nation states. And this is the time in the 19th and 20th century, as we know in the political history of the entire world, under the heydays of colonial empires, how the boundaries were being drawn, redrawn to the best initiatives and to the interest of the colonial powers. I recall here, I'll use certain translations from Tagore's pieces, and by Tagore there is no need. Before I get in he is mostly remembered to the greater mass of this subcontinent. He is mostly known for his bringing Nobel Prize, not merely to this country but to the whole of Asia, the first non-European to be awarded so, for his Gitanjali, for a number of poetries, and particularly the almost emblematic poem which nowadays is heard every time, Where the Mind is Without Fear. If this is the general perception, and he is often in Shantiniketan Vishwabharati, where I began my teaching career, he is often seen as a poet who is steeped in Upanishads, a rishi, where he started his school. Please note, he started this as a Brahmacharya Vidyalaya, and then it was turned into a school, and then into Vishwabharati, where the whole world finds a nest. This transition will come up later. Now, is this the merely Upanishadic Tagore that lies at the very soul of this nation state? That's why he is remembered, that's why his song became a national anthem to this country, holding up national spirit, giving us pride. In that case, what happens with Bangladesh? Throughout the Bangladesh Liberation War, and even before that, this poet's creations, his songs, kept the flame of the spirit of freedom alight in a country which is demographically dominated by non-Hindus, the Muslims. What Upanishads will tell the Bangladeshi people, how they grasp, if everything is Upanishadic in Tagore, if everything is regarding Brahma and Atman in Tagore, it is far more complicated, and it is perhaps not merely connected with the Upanishadic ideal of the spirit now building into a nation state. It is a little bit paradoxical, as I said. Many things about Tagore is very paradoxical, and it is very difficult to categorize him in a docket. If he was always very sharply critiquing nationalism as a sense of pride, my country, right or wrong, and always finding an other to castigate, to think as an enemy, to dominate, to run down other countries and other civilizations. How this person's songs became national anthems of two sovereign nation states. Perhaps also the Sri Lankan national anthem has also something to do with him. The poet who composed the Sri Lankan national anthem, Samarakun, Ananda Samarakun, who was a student of Tagore and was hugely inspired by Tagore's composition. In fact, on the basis of a Bengali song, the Sri Lankan version, the Lankan version was created. So he is somehow connected with three national anthems without ever subscribing to nationalism. This is something of a peculiar person, and perhaps Tagore, I do not know, if he would have been alive, would he approve of his songs being turned into national anthems? I have grave doubts. Take, for example, once during a session of the Indian National Congress, some leaders came to him and asked for his permission that one of his songs, Oi Bhuvanamana Mohini, could be sung as the patriotic song in the National Congress. Tagore objected to it, telling very clearly that this song has the typical image of a Devi worship which cannot be acceptable or can touch the heart of people outside the Hindu community. So this song should not be sung. And threw it out. Not fit for a congregation of the Congress which saw that it is beyond any sectarian groups. This sectarian part of nationalism, the religious sectarianism, he is always decrying and always standing against it. In this context, his great suspicion regarding the nation state itself is writ large. I would like to recite here in English translation a piece composed on the very last day of the 19th century, the last evening of 19th century, 31st December 1899. This is an English translation. Let me read it. Sorry. It is called The Sunset of the Century. The naked passion of self-love of nations, in its drunken delirium of greed, is dancing to the clash of steel and howling verses of vengeance. The hungry self of the nation shall burst in a violence of fury from its own shameless feeding, for it has made the world its food. The crimson glow of light on the horizon is not the light of thy dawn of peace, my motherland. She talks of the motherland, my motherland. It is the glimmer of the funeral pyre burning to ashes, the vast flesh, the self-love of the nations, dead under its own excess. This is 1899, 31st of December. Early 20th century, Tagore is traveling to USA, mainly to raise funds for his university, Vishwabharati. In USA, he was repeatedly critiquing in a very sharp and shrill voice the perils of nationalism. So much so that some of the US newspapers came out with the kind of dig, he's charging $700 per scold to us. He remained undeterred and repeatedly told to America that you are a new emerging nation. Please do not follow the footsteps of Europe to consider nation on the pedestal of divinity or the ultimate being, and don't follow the footsteps of the US. That will ultimately bring nothing but hatred. Around this time already he is a Nobel laureate. 1914, the First World War has broken out. This was the day rarely news came in a kind of torrent. Only percolated news came to him through newspapers and other avenues. There is a little piece, 3.5 pages, maybe 4 pages, a prose piece, Tagore is something much beyond the songs and poetries. Particularly his essays and his letters should be widely translated now in English and Hindi to understand his political understanding and his particularly understanding of humanism far above nationalism or narrow barriers of political parochialism. 1914, the First World War is broken. Tagore writes a brief essay called Ladayer Mool, what is at the root of this war, and categorically tells this is not a world war at all. This is European war. A European war because of the greed of nations, two nations, particularly Britain and France, who have nearly apportioned the whole world under their wings, Batwara kar liya, as colonies. Now Germany has risen and asking for a fair share of the cake, which the two other nations are denying. That's why there is a war in Europe, which is now imposed on the world and therefore turned into a world war, which is nothing but the greed of European nations. From here we can understand how it is coming up. Around this time, he was writing certain things, particularly deeply involved after his initial participation on a very major scale in freedom movement, particularly against the partition of Bengal in between 1905-10, he gradually withdraws. We know about the very sharp differences between Tagore and Mahatma Ji. I'm not getting into the details. We'll only take certain parts of it. Yet the two great men were deeply respectful to each other and knew that where the other stood, yet none of them really sort of gave up their own position. There lies perhaps the most important message. Nowadays, everything is defined. Who is a statist? Who is a non-statist? Who is a nationalist? Who is not a nationalist? Nowadays, the kind of anti-nationalist brand that is given to this institute, to many others, appears that those who are critiquing, those who are giving an alternative to multinational corporations are anti-nationals. That is something, the easy branding of the scenario. And at this point, Tagore has gradually withdrawn from the freedom movement, very doubtful that what political freedom would alone bring, even if the British are removed from the power, where this country is heading to. That is 1914. Around 1914, 1915, and that's why he's telling that political freedom, without the freedom of mind, without the emancipation of mind from the caste oppressions, from the relegating of the vast majority of Indians beyond the recognition of human beings at a subhuman level, constantly relegating women folk from each, and his eldest brother, Dwijendranath, who himself was a mathematical genius, in written, printed words, the two brothers fought on this issue. One, Dwijendranath holding on to the Indian virtues, and Tagore castigating, this is not freedom. And he called it Parivar Tantra, the clutches of the family over the members of the family. Is there freedom? If that is not freedom within the home, where would be the freedom merely by removing the political masters? And he would say, he would denounce by relegating everything to some great men or a great hand, whether that of the Englishman or of the Brahmin. He was very much against that kind of a disposition. Now in this context, let me tell you, apart from his very sharp critiquing of nationalism, what he was trying to tell us, particularly if he meant anything good for this country, felt it is education. The importance of education, he's repeatedly stressing, and that was perhaps his greatest experiment of his life, Vishwabharati, the university where I was very privileged to begin my teaching career. This is where he was trying, what colonial education does, it completely enslaves one's mind and produces only clerks and tools of further enhancement to colonialism. That is best indicated in a short parable-like story called Tota Kahini, which is available in wonderful English translation if you click the internet and click the Parrot's Tale, translated in earlier Tagore translated himself. Now in recent times, a physicist from Calcutta named Palash Baran Pal has done a superb translation of this little piece. It is quite frightening what colonial education could do. And there, in Vishwabharati, he tries something different. Not merely within the nature, not merely classes under the tree. From the beginning in 1921, when Vishwabharati becomes a university dedicated to Indian people, it is a co-educational residential teaching institution, the like of which was something abhorred in the then West. Princeton University was opened its doors to women students only in 1972. In 1921, Tagore was doing this. He was himself teaching Havelock Ellis to the undergraduate students in open class when Havelock Ellis was something of an anathema in the whole Western world, academic world. That he was trying to put this barrier down. Here, at this time, between 1912, 1920s, came up a few, apart from the Tota Kahini or the Parrot's Tale, 1917, 18, 1912, a remarkable play called Dagghar, the post office, which is also well translated and widely played on stage. This is the story of a terminally ill little boy held within the confines of the four walls. Only a post office is coming up, which gives him a flight of fancy that a letter from the king, some king, will reach him. He awaits for that. And the only window that opens before him, with that he communicates throughout the world, throughout the universe, with little things. And then he is about to die. Nobody can save him. He is terminally ill. The boy dies, but the spirit remains unfettered. Why this story I am telling? This is the drama played out over the French radio just on the eve of the fall of Paris, before Hitler's Nazi regime taking over, because this is no longer the story of a little boy terminally ill about to die. This is the story of going far beyond any kind of barrier, even in the face of death, and the undying spirit before an invading army, that nobody can kill the spirit. This is the drama which was enacted in Polish ghetto under Nazi occupation near Warsaw. Repeatedly, I was very fortunate. In 1993, I saw an English translation of the Polish adaptation of Dagghar, the post office, in London, translated by William Radice. And who played on the stage? The physically challenged people on wheelchair. This is something with multiple layers, that state repression cannot keep someone's life and spirit in fetter. Physical challenge cannot keep someone in fetters if the spirit is unfettered. It gives someone a remarkable emancipatory ability that is beyond political freedom. That he was trying to say repeatedly. I would tell another anecdote, 2 or 3, I don't take more than maximum 10 minutes. This is around the last phase of his life. Tagore is completely disillusioned with the scenario in this country, with the scenario between the two wars, and already the Second World War is about to break. He had the misfortune to see the two world wars. He did not live to see India gaining freedom. He also did not have to live to see the terrible pangs of partition. He also did not see the breakdown of the fascist regime in Europe. And perhaps also did not know the Jewish Holocaust. He was lucky, at least in that, not to have encountered these deadly scenarios. This is 1932. Tagore, I said it is difficult to find Tagore's political utterances straightforward in the form of formed opinions. These come sometimes within little bits and pieces. 1932, Tagore accepted an invitation from the Shah of Iran to visit that country. And started from Kolkata. This is wonderfully captured in a travelogue called Paroshe, now recently translated under the name from Vishwabharati as In Persia. Not a good translation, unfortunately. This is for the second time in his life he decides to fly an aircraft. First time he flew between London and Paris, way back. Second time he decides to fly. There is a nice photograph also. He stands before the aircraft. He disliked the journey, as he did in the first time. It was a kind of a very old, this primitive type of aircraft which had hopping at many, many places. He ultimately reached from Kolkata, after Delhi, Allahabad, Delhi, Jaipur, Karachi, then Bushehr. From Bushehr he drove in a car. Why so much was the dislike in an aircraft? He compared the flight of the aircraft with the fluttering of a giant cockroach. It was so bad, so nauseating for him. Why? Why did he feel it so nauseating? Now I would read a little bit from translation. As I said, it's not a very nice translation. One has to read the original in Bangla. Unfortunately, just give me a second. Let me read out, because this is a travelogue. I hope you can hear. As the aeroplane rose higher, he disliked aircrafts. Why? He is not Gandhi, that any kind of Western machines, technology would be sort of suspected, doubted by Gandhi. He is a person, Tagore is a person always embracing appropriate technology and ready to accept any gift from the Western civilization, not shutting his door close. But aeroplane he didn't like. As the aeroplane rose higher, our relationship with the earth became narrowed down from that of five senses to only one, of sight. And even that no longer intimate. In such a state of mind, I realized man can grow cruelly destructive if he's out to rain bombs from the aeroplane. Already the Air Force has started, as the aircrafts have been employed in warfare from the First World War, and already the RAF was raining bombs over Iraq at that time. He was aware of that, and that's why he makes this comment. Raining bombs from the aeroplane. Then delicate calculations as to the offense of the victims no longer paralyze his raised arms, for the very basis of that calculation has vanished. Then comes something even more startling. That's why he was extremely in discomfiture riding on an aircraft. Then suddenly comes a paragraph. The doctrines of the Gita are an aeroplane of this sort. They took the compassionate mind of Arjuna to that distant region from where the slayer and the slain, stranger and friend, could no longer be distinguished. Those hapless survivors, for them who remain, the only consolation is there. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. The body can be slain, the immortal soul is beyond any slaying. This is a verse of the Upanishad. Every time we talk of Tagore, it says that Tagore is steeped in Upanishad. This is a verse from Gita, which often in many of the Shraddh ceremonies printed, Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. He is making a parody, a mockery of this verse of the Gita. He had the only Indian who had the courage to do this. at this time. He is also making an extremely sharp critic of the Upanishads, by which he almost his entire lifeblood stood from his very childhood under the influence of his father. This is originally a verse from the Kathopanishad. He's also making an extremely sharp critic. This is something he brings, the question of warfare, of national pride, of the wanton destruction in the name of national pride, in the name of the dignity of the nation, that was always parochial, was always against humanity. And this is the scenario, once again, around slightly after this, 1940. Tagore, in his very last years of his life, with a failing health, he requests Gandhi to visit the ashram. Gandhi comes with Kasturba. There are excellent photographs, a lovely, wonderful, extremely elegant reception offered to Gandhi by Tagore. I request Mahatma to take care of his Vishwabharati after Tagore passes away. Gandhi accedes to his request. Then something, once again an anecdote happens, which will tell what he felt for human spirit, not political spirit under the garb of nationalism. This is an anecdote written by a lady who went to see the reception of Gandhi arranged by Tagore, and went with an autograph book to get autograph from Gandhi. This is in Bangla. She is a lady from Kolkata, coming from a very distinguished family of doctors, Dijendranath Moitra, and Dijendranath Moitra was a personal friend of Tagore. Both of them traveled on the same ship overseas, particularly to England. So the lady who had intimate access to the Tagore circle, and she writes that she went to both the great men seated next to each other, touched the feet of Gandhi, touched the feet of Tagore, and then pushed forward the autograph book. Gandhi wrote, and this once again I quote, Gandhi wrote in her autograph book, "Never make a promise in haste. Having one made it, fulfill it at the cost of your life," and signed. And the lady writes, Tagore, next seated to Mahatma Ji, saw it, immediately became extremely agitated, wrote a short Bangla poem which sort of carried the sense, no one can be made a prisoner forever with a chain of clay, but understood that perhaps Mahatma Ji won't understand the Bangla. So wrote, then scribbled immediately, "Fling away your promise if you found it to be false." That is the spirit. That is why we need to pay attention to this man, not validity, but his questioning helps us to question repeatedly, asking new questions, because Tagore is never on the side of certainty. What is certainty? If I recall the words of Jakob Bronowski, a remarkable mathematician and biologist who had a wonderful television serial made by BBC in the 70s called The Ascent of Man. By man at that time, the gender sensitivity was not there. So he wrote Ascent of Man mainly in the sense of what science has brought for the upward rise of human civilization. And then there is a chapter in that at the end of the book which is called Knowledge or Certainty, where he raised the question that is science bringing cars by making weapons of destruction? He says never, science never brings that. It is the political leaders who knows that there is this certain question with a ready-made certain answers, that they use science and technology for that. Science always seeks knowledge, and knowledge stands on uncertainty. You take a step forward in knowledge, and then another form of uncertainty comes. That is knowledge and uncertainty. Tagore is therefore always for uncertainty and knowledge. He would say very proudly, once he was asked, "What is your strength, Gurudev?" He said, "Inconsistency." "What is your greatest weakness, Gurudev?" Inconsistency. Let us worship and embrace this inconsistency rather than this branding, certitude that this is national, this is anti-national. You are a Pakistani if you talk about some other nations. This has to go. This is the ground where the voices of young people, of elderly people, of people from all walks of life have joined hands to question. If we do not question, particularly the state authorities, the powerful, and the established arena of thought, there is no understanding of what lies at the future. I would end here once again on a very brief poem by Tagore, 1932. This is the 12th anniversary of the Ananda Bazar Patrika, the Bangla Patrika, well known. At that time, only the Bangla editions were there. On the 12th year of its completion, they asked from Tagore a kind of a blessing, an Ashirvachan. Tagore wrote a short poem. I'm not reciting the whole of it. The last two lines are very poignant and perhaps something we can pay attention to. He wrote for the newspaper that if you really hold your own desh, your homeland, he meant Swadesh, not Jati. If you really hold your own country dear to yourself, please go beyond and above it and do not sacrifice humanity and human beings at the altar of the nation. I'll recite this piece. This is the original two lines were Shodeshere chao jodi taro urdhe oto korona desher kache manushere choto. Do not belittle, do not sacrifice human beings, humanity at the altar of the nation. That is perhaps something we have to cling to, that humanity is far more important, human beings are far more important than nation state. It is after all the entire humanity that makes a nation, not nation makes a humanity. And that is perhaps here Tagore perhaps makes us think and gives us strength to think in an alternative way. Thank you very much.